Jeremy S. Cook here, and today I'll be making an Omni Wheel robot that slides around on 4 stepper motors. It can go left and right like this, forwards and backwards, and it looks awesome in the dark because of the 2 lights on the front. Now, I say I'm building this, I'm actually perfecting it. I actually built this in a previous series of videos, but only got it to a certain point where it could just kind of crawl around on flat surfaces very, very poorly. Now, I did get it, I'll link that into the upper right hand corner of the screen here. But to see how I actually perfected it is something that works pretty well on flat surfaces, actually gets around without lurching. Check out this video. Now this first part, my first idea to solve this problem was actually to switch out the power supply from a USB power supply to a LiPo. Now I think this was a good idea because the USBs could only supply 5 volts and LiPos can supply 12, but definitely take some caution when you're using LiPos because there's a lot of danger to them. They're not supposed to be discharged past a certain level, which is something I didn't initially realize. With that power supply switched out, I thought this would fix the problems, and as you can see here, it did move around, but it just wasn't getting the right kind of traction how I wanted. Now, looking at this, I thought that perhaps the problem was the fact that some of these rollers were actually stuck together, and after quite a bit of examination, going through and marking the ones that didn't roll very well, I decided the problem was that it was actually stuck too close together. The mounts that I'd made for it allowed the 2 stacked wheels to be too close to each other. Now, what follows next is me trying to get these wheels, these plastic wheels that just didn't have a lot of grip to roll really well. Now, my eventual solution was to actually get some new wheels with more of a rubber type roller on them. So if you want to see what happens eventually, fast forward a couple minutes and you can see that. But the process I thought was kind of cool to see how the troubleshooting goes, and I had a couple ideas that were, if not good, at least interesting through the whole process. At the time though, with the rollers rolling, I thought this would definitely work with my LiPo battery supply and power and everything rolling. So it did roll around somewhat, but it just wasn't rolling how it should. You can see it there going back and forwards on the one axis, but on the other axis it's just hesitating like crazy. So you might think possibly the two steppers on either side weren't lined up correctly. Like maybe there was one side that was higher than the other. Maybe the MDF that it was made out of was warped or something. So I thought the thing I could do is make a 3D printed spacer. So I printed that out, putting out on Cura there. But made a very, very short print, and I was happy with how thin I was able to get it. Wasn't sure I'd be able to do that, but it's something like 20 thousandths of an inch thick. And I thought, well, if I put these spacerons in there, I can get everything to roll correctly. So I applied those to the bottom, and as designed, they did fit well at least. Just put them on the stepper mounts, attached everything back together, and then it was time to test everything out. I'm glad I made this design somewhat modular, so I could modify some stuff. So as you can see there, it's just not working too well on that axis. Not sliding around way too much. So the other idea I had, thought I could maybe put a little bit more weight on it. Now that did work somewhat, but I'm not crazy about putting soda cans on my design. But if any soda manufacturer wants to sponsor me, I'm all ears. Other thing I tried was putting some plastic dip on it to make it more of a rubberized surface. I think this did help a little bit, but in the end it wasn't the solution that I needed. Still was lurching around some, just missing steps. Definitely not good enough for what I had envisioned, some sort of maybe CNC machinery or even camera holder. Also made a mode where it moves at 45 degrees, kind of like how a drone would be in an X. That moved, but not accurately whatsoever. After that, I decided, well, the spacer didn't work, so what about some sort of shock absorber? What I did here was actually heated up some mold making material. I've used that in another video. I'll link that in the upper right hand corner, and made that into a 3D printed mold. Poured that into a 3D printed mold with some mold release and stuff. I weighed the whole thing to make sure everything had the same amount of weight, so in theory the height would be the same. I'm sure it was off just a little bit. These are put under all of the stepper mounts, and in theory that would let it flex up and down a little bit. Use the heatsink to actually get it to cool off a little faster, since I was a little impatient. And then I use these dental tools to take it out. Now these dental tools are great. I got them like a set for like $7 on eBay. Really great for mechanical stuff like this. You know, at the same time though, I hope my dentist doesn't know about that, because as cool as they are for taking stuff apart, I don't really want that stuff anywhere near my mouth. So all that being said, there's the kind of the shock slash dampener. And if you're watching at home, which I guess you are, you might think that these would also put the steppers at an angle. I don't know that that was the problem, but at the same time, it didn't work too well. So that being said, it's the moment you've all been waiting for, when I actually just surrendered and got some new Omni wheels with a more rubberized surface. I had to make some new mounts for that. Fortunately, the inner part was designed before, but the outer part I had to make several revisions of to get a proper press fit. Once those were press fit in, and I turned it around and started rolling on it, I could tell there was just so much more friction. It just seemed like this was what I should have done to begin with. You can see it moving around there, actually under motor control, and that looks pretty good. Now, at the same time, I wasn't going to stop right there. I still had a few other things I wanted to do to this robot. One thing I did was I made a camera mount for it, so I could put a GoPro Hero or a GoPro Session on it. I guess any sort of GoPro I could use, but it's just a 1/4 bolt, screws right on there, and yeah, I'll have some footage of that a little bit later, a little FPV view of it. I also made some eyeballs for this, some LED eyeballs with quote-unquote clear PLA material. Now, you can't see through this, but it makes a really good diffuser for LEDs. Besides looking really cool, the other purpose is that as the voltage of the LiPos goes too low, it'll turn off the eyes, meaning that you really should stop to prevent just discharging the LiPos beyond what they're supposed to do. This is a lesson I learned after discharging it too much, so you don't want to do that. Use some hot glue on that, and I tried to make it so that it would just snap in, but that didn't quite work correctly. Other thing I put on here was a analog input, a dial that I could turn to make it speed up and slow down, just because the analog input of the Arduino. And unlike the eyes, the snap-in mechanisms did work on this. So in theory, I can just take it out and put it in whenever I want. So snap it in, hook up the power, ground, and analog input, and I'm all good, all ready to go. So bolt that down with my T-handles, and there it goes. It's moving along quite nicely. Even goes a little bit faster here, so there's another view of everything with the lights on, and just looks really, really good. Now, one thing you might think is that the LiPos, well, I mean, I need a place for the LiPos, so I hot glued some Velcro down, put some Velcro straps on the LiPo battery itself, and now I've got something that looks reasonably good, besides the cool paint job from the last video. And here's another view of it traversing my workbench. It can go really slow. And there it is. I turn it down a little bit and goes even slower.
Can it go very fast?
Oh, let me get go too fast. And of course, if you're wondering whether a Strand Beast could ride on one of these Omnibots, and yes it can. We came up with this crazy idea on the Creativity podcast, which is a lot of fun, so I hope you'll check that out sometime if you get a chance. But anyway, besides that, it can go on the floor. It doesn't work quite as well as I'd hoped on this bumpy floor on my garage, but it goes here as a first-person view with the Hero Session. And you could even see it in a second inspecting the bottom of my minivan. So yeah, I guess you could say maybe this would be useful for, police applications. You could see if there's like any sort of, see if there's a muffler, any sort of drugs or contraband underneath it. And yeah, everybody's safe. All clear here. I can cross the border. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. It's been a fun robot to make. Definitely a lot more challenging to get it to the point where it would roll around nicely. With any project, sometimes it's very easy to complete them, but more often than not, it just takes a lot of effort to get it to a point where it's a presentable project. Hopefully you enjoyed the journey, and hopefully you learned something from it. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, or even consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. This is Jeremy S. Cook, signing off.